Hello, everybody. This is Lucas DePrilli from the State Newspaper. I am an education reporter covering USC and higher education. Today, we have a special guest here with us. It's Molly Spearman. She's the Superintendent of Education. Hey, Molly, how you doing today?
Good morning, Lucas. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing fine. Hope you are.
I am. Thank you so much for having us. Right now, she is in the midst of overseeing a task force called Accelerate Ed, which is trying to develop recommendations for K through 12 schools to get students back at the beginning of next year. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the chat. I'll be picking questions out to ask her. But first, just to start with, how is this task force going? How is planning for next school year going so far?
Well, going very well. We've got a wonderful group of experts, teachers, principals, superintendents, safety folks from all over the state working on the recommendations. And if I could, Lucas, just take the opportunity to clarify some rumors that are flying out there. We've made no definite decisions about how school is going to start in August. Uh, Obviously, our number one goal is always the safety of our students, safety of our teachers, staff, and we will continue that as our number one goal. Now, our second goal is to get back to school as soon as possible and as normally as possible, but working those two goals together. So the task force I've asked them to bring recommendations to me, hopefully by next Friday, on how we might operate a summer school. We're looking at doing an expanded summer reading camp, reading math camp for K through third grades students who are really struggling. And I've asked them to have those recommendations to me by next Friday. In another 2 weeks, really, recommendations on how we might be able to start school with health and safety as the number one goal for everyone, and then operating as normal as possible. So there have been some rumors flying around that everything's decided. That is definitely not the case. We are working very closely with DHEC officials who work closely with the CDC to make sure that we're following and will follow proper protocols.
Any idea when we can see some of these recommendations done? Is there a timetable for that right now?
Well, I'm working with the subcommittees. They actually are meeting today, and we have a full committee meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock, which folks can join in and listen to that if they would like, to Accelerate Ed. That's posted on our website. I've asked them if they could. The first priority is some recommendations for this summer school, which we anticipate could be late June, maybe probably more July, but that's the first set of recommendations. And then I've asked that sometime around the 1st of June, as best possible, they could give me recommendations on what they would foresee for school starting. But again, this is all still very fluid. It's hard to predict how things will be in August, and we will continue even after the recommendations are made. Nothing is set in stone because we'll be working with health officials right up to the few days prior to school opening, and to see if it's still, that we're following the best protocols. So hopefully by June, we'll have the recommendations out there. We are listening to everyone. We have focus groups that are meeting. We had a fantastic focus group yesterday with parents across the state. We have two of those with teachers. We've held phone calls with teachers, and we'll continue to do that to really make the best decision possible. I know that all of us are concerned. I'm concerned. I'm a grandparent. The folks who are on the task force are parents, grandparents, faculty members, teachers, staff members. So we all are working toward that goal and want to make really good recommendations, but the safety and welfare of our students and faculty are always at the top.
We have a question here from a reader. Her name is Christy Lancaster Palladino. I believe I pronounced that right. She's asking what accommodations will be offered for teachers who are at high risk for COVID-19, or which accommodations could be offered. What's on the table right now?
Yeah. Well, again, Christy, all of those decisions will be thought through. I can tell you that, at least as far as our state employees, and I believe that this would be very, very similar for district employees is that all of those, we're in a new world, and all of those healthcare needs have to be taken into consideration, and there will be protocols and best practices placed for school districts to abide by. A lot of those decisions will be at the local level, but we all understand that there are teachers who do have health risk that we're going to have to make special accommodations for. Decisions like whether you're going to be wearing a mask or not, some of those are very personal. I will tell you that I have already made an ask this week, last week, and then reiterated that this week with the Accelerate SC task force. That's the governor's task force. The resource committee is the one that's making recommendations on what should be covered with the $1.9 billion that will come to the state of South Carolina. And I ask for masks, protective equipment for all teachers, staff across the state. Ask that group to fund that. Now, whether or not that will be mandated that teachers wear those, I think that's a personal decision, and really the recommendation has not been completed. But my goal is to have the material, the protective equipment available if needed. So that step is already in place, and hopefully those will be ordered and will be here ready to go. Same kind of thing is happening with state employees. The guidance that we got out yesterday is that all state employees won't be required to come back to work until that material is available. So I want to be sure that we have the protective equipment there in place for school districts to offer to their staff as needed when they come back. Lucas, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sorry about that. We're getting I wanted to pass along a question from a reader who says she is a kindergarten teacher. Hearing any ideas about how to lower class sizes and to help with social distancing, especially with that really crucial age of K through 3.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for being a kindergarten teacher. Thanks. Our teachers have been absolutely fantastic, going beyond the call of duty and changing their whole style of teaching overnight. And so I really appreciate the efforts that they have made to continue teaching during this unprecedented time. We have a group looking at that. Our maintaining social distancing is very difficult. I spoke with a parent yesterday who told me that, her little 3-year-old knows how to stand on those X's at the grocery store and points to people when they're not doing the right thing. But I know to maintain social distancing all day long in a classroom of kindergarten students is going to be very difficult. I hope that we will be looking at class size. We'll be looking at protocols that the health experts give us as to how to maintain that. I know you've probably already heard some of the suggestions include things like not allowing large congregations of students in the cafeteria or in commons areas where they usually come together at the beginning of the day. That there would be staggered arrival times. All of these options are being looked at so that we can have best practices available. Again, I think everyone needs to understand that the state will give best practices to districts, to schools and principals, and to teachers to consider. But those final decisions should be made at that local level as you know your students, your classroom, and how you can bring those students together. But we'll have a list of recommendations. Every state in the nation is working on this. I'm on calls constantly. My staff is on call with counterparts across the country trying to figure all of this out. Again, it's a fluid situation that we'll have recommendations for as we move along.
A reader named Travis Johnson asked, can you talk about the safety of in-person graduation ceremonies? Do you think these ceremonies would be safe?
Well, we certainly, my heart goes out to seniors, to everyone, but particularly seniors who have missed the final 30% of their senior year with the schools being closed and all of the fantastic activities that go on that each of us remember so well from our days as a senior in high school. The governor and I both were very concerned about this and wanted to do everything possible to allow local schools, local high schools, to hold some type of ceremony to celebrate their seniors. So we have given them that flexibility, working again with DHEC and the protocols that should be followed. So we have a variety of styles. Some schools are doing drive-in graduation ceremonies. One school I know of is doing their ceremony at a drive-in movie theater where the family will come in a car. Graduate gets out and stands in front of the car to receive their diploma. Others are having in-person ceremonies. They looked to the military academy, who held a huge graduation. I believe it was at West Point or Air Force Academy, where the graduates were spaced 6 feet apart on the football field. Some had no participants. Some have had limited, very limited guests there. Our recommendation was 2 guests per graduate that would be separated 6 feet apart, have very controlled arrivals, very controlled departures of families, no congregating, sanitizers available, mask available if needed. So we're working with our school districts, and I know that I have confidence in them that I know that they're working, they're asking their parents and community to cooperate. They are streaming, most of them are streaming those ceremonies live so that those who could not attend can still join in the ceremony and celebrate. So I believe that they will be held in a proper way. And I'm very excited for our students that we can do that. This will be tedious. And I hope that everyone, all the families, graduates, those who can attend, everyone will understand that we're trying to do this to allow those seniors a chance to see each other and be together, but be at least 6 feet apart. So I feel like they will be safe as long as people practice good common sense and do what they've been asked to do.
Thank you for that. I know at the collegiate level, there is some protections in place for workers being furloughed as a result of budget cuts. So we had a reader ask about, we actually had a couple readers ask about any policies in place at the state level, not just the district level, that can protect teachers from being furloughed without notice for the fall. Apparently something like that's happening in Lawrence County. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, as you know, the continuing resolution passed yesterday afternoon. So we will begin operating school on the same budget, the same revenue that we had last year. Those decisions, as far as those local teachers, local staff members, those are local decisions. But I know that everyone, including myself, we want to keep as many people on payroll working. We need them. We want a healthy school environment with as many adults there helping as needed. And we want to keep a healthy economy going. So I know that the goal will be to keep as many people working as possible. And I certainly hope that we can have all the teachers back. But again, that is a local decision and made with operating this current year based on last year's budget, which could be a challenge. And but my encouragement would be for district leaders to really be sure to keep as many teachers on staff and other support staff, because we are certainly going to need their help when we get children back to school.
We're seeing a couple variations of a question, and it's kind of the question that's at the heart of the Accelerate Ed task force, is how are we going to do social distancing in classrooms?
Yeah, well, it's a great challenge for sure. And I know in good classrooms now, when you walk in, students are up, they're not all sitting in desks in a single row like school was when I was in school years ago. Children are up, moving around, interacting. It's going to be a real challenge and very, very difficult. I think, again, it may require our teachers to be creative and to facilitate learning again in a different way. Our students are very in tune, I believe, with what's happening, and may be more adapt to this adaptive to this than we anticipate. But it is going to be very difficult. I think the goal will be to keep a class unit as together and as separated as possible. At least that's what I'm hearing from looking at guidance that DHEC has provided and what other states are considering. Things like I mentioned before. Normally, at most schools, when children arrive, they either go right to the cafeteria or to some kind of commons area where all the students congregate. I would expect that we won't be doing that, that there would be going immediately to the classroom, having their breakfast there, as many schools already do, but also lunch, probably no assemblies, no mixing of classes for special arts or related activities or out on the playground. So I think the challenge is going to be to that teacher, to the principal, to the instructors for that unit that of classroom children. How do you keep them separated from the rest of the student body, and then within the classroom to maintain social distancing to the extent possible? It is going to be a change because we've been pushing small group work, children sitting around tables facing each other, which is not recommended anymore. It's recommended folks be, not that facial interaction. So those are all the kinds of recommendations that our task force are considering. I'm anxiously awaiting their recommendations, and certainly if any of our viewers have recommendations, they can email me through the website at the Department of Education. That's ed.sc.gov, and you'll see how to get suggestions to me. So we are open for suggestions, and knowing that it is going to be a tremendous challenge. But I do believe we can make it happen. And do it in a way that we can keep the safety of our students and teachers at the forefront. It may not ever be 100%. And I think that's something that we all need to come to that realization that, in a school setting, whether it's the flu season or whether we're talking about COVID-19, common cold, or whatever, we can never make that setting 100% safe, but we certainly can do everything possible to get as close to 100% safe as we can.
Thank you for that. We've had a couple questions, and I know this has come up with the Accelerate Ed meetings. In terms of school buses, we have a reader, Helen Lang Evans, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, asks, how will we be social distance? How will social distancing work on school buses?
Mm-hmm. Well, our transportation folks are working and in conversation with the National Transportation Board and other national associations of transportation on what the best practices will be. Currently, our school buses, our largest buses, can carry about 75 plus students on one of those really large buses, 3 children to a seat, which is not, which is something that we're going to have to really reconsider. To maintain total social distancing with a 6-foot square perimeter tremendously cuts down the ridership on a bus down to 11, 15 children per bus. And in a time when we're already in some places running double routes and needing children to arrive within a certain time limit, it presents a lot of challenges. We will go by those best practice protocols. And again, some of this is still very fluid, and we're awaiting information on how best to social distance on buses. But certainly that is another part of the recommendations that I'm looking forward to coming from this task force. Our folks at the Transportation Department at the Department of Education are working very closely with Accelerate Ed subcommittee on that. I've had our folks, we order new buses that we had money allocated so that we can have as many as possible available. Some things that have been mentioned, are spacing children on the buses, having children from the same household sit together on a seat, not mixing households of children. That should help with the capacity. But again, I'm awaiting recommendations, and we'll follow whatever those best practices are.
Thank you. And to change gears a little bit here, I know this has also been something that's been a major topic at the task force and among educators. What are we going to do to make sure special
Mm,
needs students can still receive the quality of education they were receiving before this?
right. Well, again, a huge concern for us. I think first reminder is that many special education children or children with IEPs, individual education plans, as you know, get their instruction right alongside children without disabilities, and they are mainstreamed into the regular classroom. So they should be receiving similar activities, similar learning environment as regular students. But there are those students who receive support services. Who really need additional one-on-one attention or very small group attention. So we are working with ABLE South Carolina. We've been doing that throughout the pandemic to offer modules of training, learning lessons for students through their modules that they had already prepared. We're working with our teachers to make sure that they are using every best practice possible. And just recently, in the governor's last order, where he gave the flexibility for schools to close out the year, giving them some more flexibility for those last 2 weeks to allow families to bring equipment back in. He did allow for some small group instruction to happen, small group support, one-on-one with a student, a teacher, a student, or maybe a very small group of students. The caveat was social distancing and making sure that both parties, the student and their family and the instructor, were comfortable with that. I've had emails from some teachers who are already working one-on-one in schools with and very pleased to do that and feel very comfortable. Same time, I've heard from some who are reluctant to start due to health issues. So again, I think we have to be aware of all the different caveats that are there and make the best decision for the individual family and student and instructor. But there are some activities already starting, even to the point of some students going in for individual assessments. Some parent-teacher conferences are being held face to face with social distancing and the comfort level of both parties agreeing to that. So I hope that we will see more of that happening so that we can get some normalcy back. But again, we have to be very careful. Now, the other part is often these students, some of these students are very vulnerable and have other health issues as well. So it's not a one size fits all. You can do it this way for everybody, but we have to really look at it individualized and make it very personal for the student, family, and instructor.
Thank you for that. At the last Accelerate Ed meeting, you read a statistic that said there were 150,000 households throughout the state who have kids who lack internet access. It sounded like you were shocked by that number. I was too. And that brings us to our next question. It's someone who says she is Olivia Knight Spears, who says she is a teacher in Lexington 4 and wants to know about access to internet, especially for rural areas where they may only have satellite internet.
Right. Well, this pandemic has certainly brought the disparity of the availability, accessibility of technology across South Carolina to the forefront. And it has the disparity of how we've been able to deliver instruction has is so real. Some have not missed a beat, where children are Zooming every day with all their teachers for every class, and it's really going very well. Others are having to do pencil and paper, doing the best they can. Some families with devices, but yet no access. So if there's anything good that's going to come out of all of this, and I think there will be things, this is one of them, that it has brought this issue to the forefront. I've had lots of meetings, had one yesterday, talking with the providers, and I've learned a lot myself. There is a lot of broadband availability across South Carolina, but there's still lots of homes that don't have the accessibility, and the reasons are different. Some there's not, it's to the curb, it's not to the house, or it's available, but we can't afford it. So I will tell you that I am very committed, and I believe that our providers are very committed to work on this and with a plan. And it has expedited that plan and the workings of that plan forward, so that I believe we're going to see improvement made over the summer and the fall, and really hopefully to that level where not too far off in the distant future, we can say that every household in South Carolina does have access. Now, it may not all be the highest speed, but it would be to a level that students would be able to do their classwork, that families could get telehealth services, that mom and dad might be able to apply for unemployment benefits or for a job, even better, at home. So I will tell you that we're all working together. Accelerate Ed is talking about it, Accelerate South Carolina, the State Chamber of Commerce, the General Assembly. The providers are all working very focused, including our congressional delegation, working very focused to bring a better accessibility plan to folks all across our state. I live out in the country myself. A few years ago, about a year and a half ago, I would not have been able to participate in this interview because we did not have high speed internet at our house. Our electric co op, Mid Carolina Co op, has provided that now. So, not only the telephone providers, the big regional providers that are very interested in Wi Fi, the telephone providers who are interested in the broadband coverage, all of them working together, we can make this happen. And it is time. And I believe that the funding now is available to make this happen. The CARES Act funding that we are receiving through the Department of Education that will go out to districts allow school districts to purchase the devices, equipment that is needed. We have some funding that we can help with this on buying the licensures that are needed. And then in the governor's huge pot, there's additional funding. The General Assembly is very interested in this as well. So I'm very, very encouraged that we will get better at this very quickly.
Thank you for that. And one last question. I know you got to go here soon, but we had a reader who asked if class sizes must decrease due to social distancing regulations, wouldn't that mean that we have an even larger teacher shortage than we have now?
Well, that's certainly a challenge. We have it's hard for us to meet the need of teaching right now as we are operating schools right now. So, it's easy for folks to say, oh, let's just cut everything in half and have approximately 10 children per class. I would love to see that happen. We'll be looking at it, but certainly the number of teachers available to fill those slots is an issue. Not just teachers, but space availability, facility availability. So I appreciate the reader being cognizant of all the challenges that we have. Again, it takes a lot of really smart people looking at this, very creative folks. That's why I have the Accelerate Ed group, and looking forward to their recommendations on how best to follow good health protocols to make South Carolina safe and get our children back to school with teachers who feel safe and parents who feel comfortable in sending their children for us. There's no doubt that is the best situation. As we're trying as hard as we can to make e-learning work and the pencil paper packets work, but there's nothing like that relationship between a child and his teacher, and that learning of climate and that learning atmosphere that teachers help establish with their students, not only building their content knowledge, but helping them build the skills and the characteristics of working with each other, doing group work, figuring out how to solve problems. And all of that goes on with that classroom climate and that classroom group. So it is a real challenge. There are lots of issues. I appreciate people being sympathetic to that. But I hope everyone will, again, understand no final decisions have been made. And actually, no final decisions can be made until we get a little closer to that time in August when school would start back. But we're going to try and be prepared with the recommendations from our groups and have several options available to Number one, make sure everyone's safe. And number two, get back to as normal as possible for our students and our teachers.
Well, thank you so much for being very generous with your time. I really appreciate it. For everyone on Facebook, before you log off, I see there was a ton of questions that haven't been able to be answered yet. Some of them I might know the answer to or might be able to point you in the right direction. So I have some time after this meeting. I'm going to scroll through the Facebook and try to answer as many of these questions as I can, just to help you guys out. Some of them I've written about, some of them I don't know the answer to. But thank you guys all so much for participating, and I really appreciate you guys reading. And thank you so much, Molly. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care.